Madison Turner had always believed in balance. She designed spaces for a living, soft linens against dark oak, warm lights casting golden hues across cool concrete. Harmony was her art form, and for a long time, she thought she'd curated the same kind of symmetry in her marriage. She and Brandon Turner had been together for 6 years. They met in college. She, a design major who thrived on vision boards and late-night sketching sessions. He, a marketing guy with charm, ambition, and just enough swagger to be intoxicating. At first it worked. Their chemistry felt effortless. When they moved into a cozy craftsman home in Northeast Portland, it felt like the beginning of forever. But forever, as it turned out, had an expiration date. It happened on a Thursday. Madison was at the Pacific Northwest Design Expo in Seattle, networking with potential clients and creatives over croissants and conversation. The venue was alive with color, potted succulents on every table, reclaimed wood displays, lavender tea being poured into stoneware cups. It was her kind of place. She had just stepped aside to snap a photo of a gorgeous terracotta centerpiece when her phone lit up. Brandon, her lips curled into a reflexive smile. She stepped out into the hallway, cradling the phone between her ear and shoulder. She expected warmth, affection. Maybe a, "How's the expo, babe?" Or, "Bring me back one of those candles you always hoard." Instead, she got this. "I'm divorcing you," he said. "Also, I sold the house. So, you'll need to figure out where you're going to live." It took a second for the words to register. The hallway around her seemed to slow, then disappear entirely. "I'm sorry, what?" she said, her voice calm but clipped. "I already sold the house," he repeated. "Savannah and I are moving in together. She deserves better than that dusty old place." Savannah. Madison's brain recoiled like she'd been slapped. She'd heard the name before, always floating casually in Brandon's stories about work functions. Savannah from sales, Savannah the one who gets his humor. Madison had always had her doubts, but Brandon made her feel silly for voicing them. Now the truth wasn't even disguised. He said her name like it was a declaration of triumph, as if she had no right to be shocked. Madison didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood in that hallway, staring out a narrow hotel window, the city of Seattle buzzing below her, like nothing had changed. "Good to know," she said flatly. "Thanks for the heads up." Then she hung up. Her legs felt like sandbags as she leaned against the wall. The muffled sounds of people chatting and laughing behind the closed banquet doors felt surreal, too normal for a moment when her world had just cracked wide open. That night, she sat on her hotel bed in silence, the skyline blinking indifferently outside her window. She stared at her hands, then at her wedding ring, then at nothing. And then, like a whisper, she remembered something. The refinance. A few months ago, they had refinanced the mortgage to lock in a lower rate. Madison had asked to move the deed into her name alone for liability reasons. Brandon hadn't even blinked. He was in a rush to catch a Blazers game and signed the papers without reading. She scrambled to open her cloud storage, her fingers trembling as she typed in her login. Scrolling through folders, she found it. Deed of ownership. Under her name. Only her name. She let out a long, shaky breath. Her chest still ached, but beneath the pain something else stirred. Resolve. It wasn't over, not even close. The next morning at 7:03 a.m., she FaceTimed Zoe Carter, her best friend from college, and a damn good real estate attorney. Zoe answered with messy hair and a coffee mug. "Talk to me." "Brandon thinks he sold the house," Madison said, eyes still puffy but sharp. "Behind my back, while I was in Seattle." Zoe blinked. "Please tell me you have the deed." "He signed it over in January. It's just me now." Zoe let out a slow, satisfied breath. "Well, shit. He's toast." Madison's mouth twitched into a bitter smile. "He sold a house he doesn't own. That's fraud. At best, a civil case. At worst, criminal." "Let him hang himself," Madison said. "I just want to tighten the noose." Zoe's legal brain kicked into gear. "We'll draft a cease and desist. Notify the buyer and the agent. The sale's invalid. The fallout is his problem now." "Make it loud," Madison said. "I want the blowback to echo." Madison checked out of her hotel early. Instead of flying, she took the train back to Portland, needed time to think, to sit in the weight of what was happening. Her notebook lay open on her lap as the scenery blurred by. She made a list. Notify the buyer. Notify the listing agent. Prepare documentation. Start divorce proceedings. Take the house back, room by room. She titled the page in bold letters, Project Foundations. Back home, the house felt unfamiliar. Brandon's things were still there, his sneakers in the hallway, his cologne on the dresser, a half-eaten protein bar on the kitchen counter. It was eerie, as if the house had refused to register the betrayal. She walked slowly through the rooms, camera in hand, taking photos of everything. Not for legal proof, though that too, but for herself. "I want to remember what this place looked like before I took it back," she whispered to no one. That evening she opened a bottle of red and called Zoe again. "I'm going to fight, Zoe." "Good. I already filed the notice. His buyer's furious." "Let him panic," Madison said, her voice steadier now. "Let Savannah panic too." "You sure you're okay?" Madison looked around the house. The home she loved. The home Brandon tried to steal like it was just an asset. Like she was just a phase. "I'm not okay," she said, "but I'm ready." Outside, the sky had turned a deep indigo. Inside, Madison opened a fresh notebook and began sketching ideas, not for a client this time, but for herself. New drapes, a new color palette for the hallway, a reclaimed dining table, not to erase the past, but to rebuild, brick by brick, a future that was hers alone. Because this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclamation, and she wasn't afraid anymore. Madison woke the next morning before the sun had even started to rise. Sleep had never truly arrived. Her mind had been too loud, too busy sketching out battle plans instead of dreaming. The pillow beside her was untouched. Brandon's side of the bed still held the faint shape of his absence, a dent in the mattress and a ghost in the sheets. But Madison didn't feel sad. She felt sharpened, focused, like steel pulled from a forge. Wrapped in her robe, she padded barefoot to the kitchen and brewed coffee, the same kind Brandon never made without complaining. The smell filled the air like permission. At exactly 7:03 a.m., she FaceTimed Zoe. "Let's go over everything again," Madison said, voice steady. Zoe appeared on screen, makeup-free, hair up in a bun, flipping through a stack of printed PDFs like a soldier preparing for war. "You own the house, full stop. He signed over his rights during the refinance. You've got notarized proof. This isn't even a gray area." "And the buyer?" Zoe's lips curled into a smirk. "Not thrilled. Brandon told him the property was his outright. The guy is ready to go nuclear, threatening to sue, wants his money back yesterday." Madison raised an eyebrow. "Let him." Zoe leaned in. "Madison, I've seen a lot of divorces, but this is a gold-plated ticket to victory. If you want to destroy him, now is the time." Madison didn't blink. "I don't want to destroy him. I want to expose him, and then I want him to live with the consequences. That's worse." Zoe nodded slowly. "That's the Madison I know." By noon, Madison had checked out of her hotel in Seattle and boarded the Amtrak Cascades line back to Portland. She chose the train deliberately. Something about watching the Pacific Northwest blur by helped her think, helped her breathe. She sat by the window with her notebook open, not sketching interiors but building something else, a step-by-step revenge plan. She called it Project Foundations, a blueprint, not for vengeance, but for recovery, justice, reclamation. Step 1. Notify the buyer and real estate agent. The sale was invalid. Brandon had no right. Step 2. Gather every document. Scan it, save it, print 3 copies. Step 3. Contact a divorce attorney and begin proceedings immediately. Step 4. Remove Brandon, physically and emotionally, from the home, her life, and her narrative. Step 5. Reclaim the space, room by room, until there was no trace of him left. Step 6. If needed, go public. Madison wasn't above exposing him if he kept pushing. When the train pulled into Portland, it was nearly dusk. The city wore its usual gray, like a comfortable hoodie. Madison took a deep breath before heading home. As she opened the front door to the house that had once held so much promise, She was struck by how foreign it already felt. Brandon's things were everywhere, his sneakers in the entryway, his hoodie draped over the back of the couch. His cologne still clung faintly to the air, but the warmth was gone. She walked through each room slowly, as if inspecting the damage after a flood. This wasn't her home anymore. It was a museum of betrayal. She pulled out her phone and began taking photos. Click. The coat rack they bought together at the Saturday market. Click. The spice rack she'd meticulously organized, now disheveled. Click. The bookshelf where Brandon had shoved his unread tech memoirs next to her antique design volumes. Not for legal reasons, though they'd help. No, these photos were for her, a reminder of what she was about to undo. That evening, she called her best friend, Jenna Price, and asked her to come over. "Bring wine," she texted, "and boxes." Jenna arrived 20 minutes later, a tornado of energy and curse words. "I still can't believe this man tried to sell your house like it was a used car. Savannah? Seriously?" Madison poured 2 glasses of red. "She's apparently the love of his life. Deserves better than that old place, Gaita," he said. Jenna nearly spit out her wine. "Better? Babe, this house has hardwood floors and vintage crown molding. Savannah sells knockoff essential oils on Instagram and calls herself a spiritual mentor." They laughed, sharp, bitter laughter, but cathartic. Then Jenna looked around and said, "Let's start packing his crap." They began with his closet. Jenna tossed shirts into a box like she was pitching fastballs. "College hoodie, toss. Graphic tees, gross. Why does he have 17 of the same gray polo?" Madison carefully folded his dress shirts, not because she cared, but because it gave her control. They moved to the bathroom next. Madison opened the drawer he'd claimed as his and stared for a beat. His razor, his cologne, that stupid clay hair paste he swore by. She threw it all into a trash bag. By midnight, Brandon's presence had been condensed into 4 cardboard boxes and a single trash bag. They left the boxes by the door, like a warning. "I forgot how peaceful this house could feel," Madison said, curled up on the couch with her wine. Jenna nodded, lighting a lavender candle. "That's because the chaos was never you, Mads. It was always him." The next morning, Zoe called with an update. "The buyer's lawyer contacted me. He wants to avoid suing you. He understands now that Brandon's the fraud. We're in the clear." Madison let out a long breath. "That's one fire put out. I also pulled records from the title office. The house is yours, clean. Brandon never even bothered to look at the fine print. You've got him cornered." "Good," Madison said. "Let him squirm." "You ready for the next step?" Madison stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the small backyard garden she had once lovingly planted, now overgrown and neglected. "I'm more than ready," she said. "I'm about to redesign my life, and he's not in the mood board." That night, as she lay in bed, Madison didn't feel lonely. She felt powerful. Brandon thought he had pulled the rug out from under her, but what he didn't know was she owned the floor, and she was about to renovate everything. 3 days later, the storm arrived, not with thunder or rain, but with Brandon's heavy footsteps slamming through the front door like a battering ram. Madison had been sitting at the dining table, sipping her morning tea and reviewing some client mood boards when the front door flew open. Brandon stood there, disheveled, holding a crumpled sheet of paper. "What the hell is this, Madison?" he barked, waving the letter like it was a weapon. She didn't flinch. "It's a cease and desist," she said calmly, setting her tea down. "It explains why your fake sale is officially dead in the water." His face turned a deep, blotchy red. "You had no right to contact the buyer." "Funny," she said, standing slowly, "because you had no right to sell a home that doesn't belong to you." Brandon stalked into the living room, his energy erratic. "We were married! That house is just as much mine as it is yours." Madison walked over to the hallway cabinet, pulled open a drawer, and returned with a file folder. She flipped it open and held up a document. "You signed this, remember? When we refinanced. You didn't even bother reading it, just scribbled your name so you wouldn't miss the basketball game." She held the deed toward him like a mirror. "You signed full ownership to me. This is your signature. This is your mistake." For a long moment, Brandon just stared at the paper. Then he took a step back, the fight flickering in his eyes. "You tricked me." "No," she replied, her voice even colder now. You ignored me. You always have. That's not trickery, Brandon. That's your own ego." Before he could reply, the doorbell rang. Madison already knew who it was. She opened the door to reveal Savannah, standing there in a flowy cardigan, oversized sunglasses, and dragging a rose gold suitcase behind her. "Brandon?" she said brightly, until her eyes landed on Madison. Her expression dropped. "Oh, you're still here." "Yes," Madison said, leaning casually on the doorframe. "I live here." Savannah blinked. "But Brandon said he told me the house was already sold, that you were moving out." Madison shrugged. "Brandon says a lot of things. Unfortunately, none of them are legally binding." Brandon stepped into view behind her. "Savannah, baby, just come inside. I can explain." Madison stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. "By all means, come in. See the house Brandon tried to sell you." Savannah crossed the threshold hesitantly, scanning the room like she was stepping into enemy territory. "He said we were moving in this week," she muttered. "I picked out furniture." "That's unfortunate," Madison replied, "because this house isn't his to give." Savannah's head snapped toward Brandon. "You said you owned it. You said everything was handled." "It was supposed to be," Brandon snapped. "She's just being dramatic." "No," Madison cut in. "I'm being factual. He tried to sell a house he doesn't own. That's fraud." Savannah blinked. "Fraud?" "Yes. It's illegal. There's a lawyer involved. There's a very angry buyer. And if Brandon doesn't return the deposit, he could be facing criminal charges." Savannah turned to Brandon, her voice rising. "Did you lie to me? About all of this? About the house, the sale, the money?" "No, I mean, not really. I just thought—" "You thought?" she interrupted. "You dragged me into a crime scene because you thought?" Brandon looked like a man unraveling, threads of his composure snapping one by one. "I can fix it," he said. "Just give me some time. I'll make it right." But Savannah was already grabbing her suitcase. "I'm not getting arrested because you wanted a second shot at real estate glory." She turned to Madison before walking out. "Honestly, good for you. I had no idea he was this dumb." Then she was gone. Brandon slammed the door behind her, breathing hard. "You think this is funny?" "No," Madison said, pouring herself a fresh cup of tea. "I think it's justice." "You're ruining my life." "You tried to ruin mine. The difference is, I'm better at it." He stood there silent, staring at the boxes by the door. Madison had labeled them weeks ago. Brandon, Office Brandon, Closet Brandon, Junk Drawer. Yes, really. "You need to go," she said quietly. "Today." "I don't have anywhere to go." "Not my problem. You made your choices." "We were married, Madison, for 6 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" She looked him in the eye, for the first time without any emotion. "You ended that marriage the moment you made that phone call. The moment you laughed about me needing to find a new place to live. That laugh, it's why I'll never forgive you." He sat down heavily on the couch, burying his head in his hands. "Please, I screwed up, but I'm still your husband." "No, Brandon, you're a cautionary tale." She walked over to the kitchen counter and pulled out a folder. It made a soft thud as she set it on the coffee table. "This is the divorce paperwork. My lawyer drafted it last week. I suggest you read this one before signing." He stared at it like it was poison. "You really hate me that much?" Madison shook her head. "I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. You had someone who loved you, a home, a life we built together, and you threw it all away for someone who just left you at the door." She opened the front door and stood beside it. "You have until sundown. Take your things. Go wherever liars go when they run out of rope." He looked up at her, broken and furious. "You're heartless." "No," she said. "I just finally stopped being your safety net." And with that, she turned and walked into her newly reclaimed living room, the sound of his footsteps finally moving toward the exit behind her. She stood still for a moment after the door closed, her body trembling, but not from fear, from release. The confrontation was over. The hurricane had passed. Now came the rebuilding. The house was silent, not the heavy, suffocating silence that had filled the rooms in the days after Brandon's betrayal, but a new kind of stillness, one that felt like breathing space, a fresh page, a clean canvas. Madison stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, barefoot on the hardwood floor. She could still feel the echo of Brandon's presence, his voice bouncing off the walls, his sneakers thudding across the tile, his ego polluting the air. But now, it was just her and Liberty. The rescue cat had arrived 2 days earlier, small, gray, wide-eyed, and already fiercely loyal. Liberty trailed her around the house like a shadow, occasionally brushing against her legs as if to say, "You're not alone anymore." Madison's mornings changed first. She started waking early, not out of stress, but from intention. She would brew her coffee, stretch on the yoga mat that had collected dust for months, and sit by the window in the living room with a sketch pad, letting the light and her thoughts pour in. Brandon's boxes were gone. He'd picked them up 2 days after the confrontation, in awkward silence. No arguments, no goodbyes, just the shuffle of cardboard and the final click of the front door as it closed behind him for good. Madison didn't watch him leave. She didn't need to. She'd already let go. Zoe had made quick work of the legal paperwork. "It's almost too easy," she told Madison over lunch one afternoon. "He's got no leverage. The house, yours, the fraudulent sale, dead. The divorce terms, all in your favor. It's a textbook takedown." Madison sipped her green tea, watching the steam curl upward. "It's not about punishment anymore," she said. "It's about peace." Zoe leaned in. "That's exactly why you're winning." Madison turned her focus to reclaiming her space, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. She started with the bedroom. Gone were the navy blue sheets Brandon insisted on. She replaced them with soft, neutral linens and added a woven headboard she'd been eyeing for months, but never bought because Brandon called it too boho. She changed the curtains, added string lights, bought herself a set of lavender-scented candles. For the first time, the room felt like hers. Then came the guest room. She painted it a soft pistachio green and turned it into a creative nook, half reading lounge, half studio space. She moved in a drafting table, hung watercolor landscapes from local artists, and filled the bookshelf with design books, poetry, and the journals she had hidden during her marriage. It became her sanctuary, a place of restoration, of rebirth. She even started a blog. It began as a private journaling exercise. Then Zoe read one of the entries and convinced her to post it online under the name Home Again. At first, the readership was small. A few comments here and there, then one post titled "Redesigning a Life That Wasn't Built for You" went semi-viral. Thousands of women read it, shared it, left messages like, "This story is mine. Thank you for giving voice to what I couldn't say out loud. You just helped me leave a man who made me feel small." Madison was stunned. She'd written to heal, but her pain had translated into a kind of light for others, and that gave her something she hadn't felt in months: purpose. One gray afternoon, Jenna came over with Thai takeout and a bottle of Pinot Noir. They sat cross-legged on the floor, Liberty curled up between them. "You're different now," Jenna said, watching her carefully. "Not just less angry, lighter." Madison nodded. "It's strange. I thought the end of this marriage would break me, but I feel more whole than I've ever been." Jenna raised her glass. "To endings that become foundations." They clinked glasses. Madison smiled. "To finally seeing who you are without someone else trying to edit the blueprint." Brandon had tried to reach out, a text here, a voicemail there. "We should talk." "You're really doing this? You're going to ruin me." Madison never responded. She didn't need closure from him. She already had it. In her quiet mornings, in her cat's steady companionship, in the way the house now smelled of vanilla and eucalyptus instead of Brandon's cologne and bitterness. She'd built a new life inside the very walls he thought he could steal. The garden came next. It had always been her space, tiny, modest, but full of promise. In the past year, it had grown neglected. Brandon always said they didn't have time for it, that plants were too much effort for too little return. But now, Madison spent entire weekends outside. She cleared weeds, repotted herbs, added a tiny fountain in the corner. Birds came back. Butterflies fluttered around the lavender. Liberty even tried to catch one, leaping with delight. One morning, as she knelt by the rosemary, soil on her hands, a neighbor walked by and waved. "The yard looks beautiful," he said. "It's good to see you smiling again." She smiled back. Thank you. It feels like it's breathing again. Every inch of the house now carried her energy. No more Brandon, no more Savannah, no more silence, only music, laughter, freedom. Zoe's final update came via text. Divorce, final hearing is scheduled. He's signing, no drama. You're officially free next week. Madison read it, then looked up at the sun spilling through the kitchen window. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in what felt like years, she exhaled. The morning of the final court hearing, the sky over Portland was impossibly clear, the kind of bright blue morning that felt rare after so many gray days. Madison stood on her front porch with a mug of chamomile tea, watching Liberty chase a fallen leaf across the deck. A ping from her phone cut through the stillness. Zoe. Final hearing confirmed for 10 a.m. Judge already reviewed the paperwork. Barring any surprises, you'll be legally free by lunch. Madison stared at the message for a long second, then smiled. No tears, no nerves, just stillness, and a quiet sense of victory. She went back inside and changed into a simple white blouse and high-waisted navy trousers. Clean, sharp, confident. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. She looked at herself in the mirror and, for the first time in a long time, saw herself. Not a wife, not a victim, not someone rebuilding. Just Madison Turner, whole. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just her, Zoe, and a clerk. Brandon didn't even show up. Zoe whispered, "He signed everything yesterday. Coward didn't want to face you." Madison nodded slowly, a mix of emotions welling, but none of them bitter. If anything, his absence was a gift. It gave her the clean break she didn't know she needed. The judge signed the decree and stamped it with a dull thud. "Congratulations, Ms. Turner. You're officially divorced." Madison exhaled. It wasn't relief. It wasn't grief. It was freedom. That evening, Jenna took her out to celebrate. They sat on the rooftop bar of a boutique hotel downtown, string lights flickering above them like fireflies. The city buzzed below, unconcerned, unaffected, but to Madison, the world felt different. Lighter. Jenna raised her glass. "To freedom." Madison clinked hers gently. "To remembering who the hell I am." They laughed and sipped champagne as a breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of something sweet, maybe jasmine, maybe possibility. The weeks that followed were a soft bloom of change. Madison's blog exploded in popularity. Home Again became a haven for thousands of women looking to reclaim their lives. She received emails every day, some heartbreaking, some hopeful. "Your story gave me the courage to leave. You made me feel seen. I finally moved out today. Thank you." She didn't consider herself an influencer or an expert. She was just someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side with soot in her hair and a blueprint in her hands, and she was willing to share it. She turned her guest room into a podcast studio. Simple setup, a mic, soft lighting, acoustic panels. She titled the show The Freedom Blueprint. Each week she told a story, some hers, some from anonymous submissions. Each one about rising from the wreckage, reclaiming identity, redesigning life after loss. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Women reached out in droves, some sent voice notes, some handwritten letters. One even mailed her a painting of Liberty, curled in a sunbeam. Madison framed it and hung it in the hallway. One Saturday morning, she went through an old storage box and found a photo of her and Brandon from years ago, arms around each other, smiling on the front porch the day they bought the house. She stared at it for a long moment. There had been love once. She wouldn't rewrite history, but love wasn't enough, not when paired with manipulation, betrayal, and ego. She tucked the photo into an envelope and placed it in a drawer. She didn't burn it. She didn't need to. It was part of her past, but it no longer defined her. The house looked completely different now, not because she'd knocked down walls or installed luxury upgrades, but because everything felt intentional. Every candle, every frame, every plant was placed with love, not compromise. The air itself seemed lighter. Neighbors complimented the changes. "Your place feels like it's glowing," one said. "That's because I finally let in the light," Madison replied. Brandon tried contacting her once more. A long email, apologies, regret, the usual mix of self-pity and half-truths. I was lost. I didn't mean to hurt you. I still care about you. She read it once, then hit archive. That chapter was closed, and she had no intention of rereading it. One night, as she curled up on the couch with Liberty and a cup of lemon tea, she looked out at the stars and whispered, "Thank you." Not to Brandon, not to fate, but to herself, for not breaking, for choosing herself, for building again. She didn't know exactly what the future held. Maybe she'd move in a year. Maybe not. Maybe she'd fall in love again. Or maybe she'd fall deeper in love with solitude. Either way, she knew this. Her life would be designed with intention, with care, with no room for people who didn't value her worth. And for the first time in years, she felt free.